So, welcome everybody to our latest CureME question and answer video. We're here with well, how do we want to say this? Is it the CureME team first, or is it the CFS CFS Biobank?
I suppose we are really the CureME team, but yes, it's the CFS Biobank that we are most known for.
Right, right. So, can we get some introductions first, and perhaps a little bit of biography about what you do there?
Great. I'll start if that's all right. My name is Jack. You don't hear very much from me on social media and so on and so forth because I'm not a researcher, but I'm the CureME team's project manager and administrator. I deal with all of the team's finances and all of our legal affairs and everything like that that involves, that doesn't directly involve the research. And I'm the voice behind the CFS Biobank social media. So if you're ever in touch with us there, then it's probably me you'll be talking to.
Okay, great.
I'm Eliana Lassed. I'm the co-founder of the CureME group and the Biobank as well. And I have been working with the CFS from 2007. And we are carrying out research. I'm a clinical assistant professor at the London School.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Caroline Kingdon and I'm the research nurse, but I also wear a couple of other hats. I'm trying to find time to be a research fellow, and I also help administrate the biobank, sending samples to researchers, etc.
Hi there, I'm Kate Moody and I'm a research fellow. I joined the team last year, helping out with writing papers, managing the data, analyses, and it's been very exciting.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so we've already touched on this, the fact that you're both CureME, sorry, as well as the CFS Biobank. So is it really a case of you all wear both hats? Or
shall I answer that one? Yeah, I mean, a lot of our social media comes out about the biobank, and on Facebook and Twitter we have the biobank heading as a title. We've tried to move away from it a little bit and get back to the CureME name because we really want to emphasize that we're about more than just the biobanking. Actually, we've got a multi-million-dollar research project running funded by the NIH. We've got other research projects funded in collaboration with the ME Association and others. And the biobank is a pretty important part of our work, but actually we see CureME more as the kind of umbrella that covers all of it. The biobanking, the research, and also any kind of outreach and advocacy that we do.
okay, brilliant. So when we're talking about research papers, that's obviously coming from like you just explained, the CureME part of that. So if we start touching on your research first, so you've had quite a number of papers out recently. Sorry.
5 in 5 months, I think.
Well, you wait ages for one paper and then they all come out all at once. So first of all,
careful with the papers that we put out. So this is why we are going on and doing analysis and checking the results in order to get the papers out.
Sure. So with you had a study which looked at hand grip strength in patients. Now we've got a question from one of our members. So I'm going to summarize it probably badly, in that you found that in ME patients that hand grip strength rapidly decreased. Would I be right in summarizing it broadly like that?
Yes.
Yeah. So one of our members asks, could that solely be down to deconditioning, or is there proof that is due to the condition itself?
I think that one of the things that is important to know is that the hand grip, it's not measuring only the muscles from the hand. It has been the way we decided to put into our clinical assessment was because it has been proven in cardiovascular disease that it is a measurement of the whole body function.
Okay.
This is why we are measuring it. And we, in the analysis that Kate was brilliantly done, doing the part of the analysis, is usually we expect that this shows some deconditioning as well.
Yeah.
But the reason that we have these results, we believe, is that it really measures something that is different and it relates to the disease. And we were not expecting to find that clear result. And we have two control groups. One is that MS, and the other one is healthy controls. And also we control the analysis for the activity level. So we believe that actually the results show something that is there, and it could be helping us to diagnose better patients according to severity.
Right. The follow-on part to that question, so thank you for explaining that. Would it be possible to look at patients testing the hand grip strength for over a longer time period? Would you see any benefit in doing so? Would that inform?
I don't think so at this moment. I think that we can do this at the clinical assessment that we do in the longitudinal way. We can show, for example, we assess people at baseline and then 6 months after, and we can compare this. But to do in a kind of more intense way and to wait for doing this in these results,
Yeah.
I think that it could be on the edge of the ethical, do no harm.
Right, right.
So I think that we have to be very careful with our procedures. And this is the procedure that has been used and validated in different diseases, and this is what we are following.
Sure. So to clarify a little bit, at least to myself, is that your concern, if you did do it for longer, would be the potential causing post-exertional malaise? Is that a possibility?
It is a possibility, not in a very flare-up of symptoms, but
Sure.
I think that we have to handle our participants with all the care that we can. So
Right.
I don't see any reason to do this procedure in a different way.
Okay. Right, thank you for that. Now, we mentioned 5 studies. Next one on my list is you put out a paper which basically covered, if I'm summarizing correctly, how the biobank works. And
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So did you see the value of putting that out as really, hopefully, encouraging good working practice in other potential biobanks that might come about, or it wasn't just showing off, I assume?
Yes, so we don't want a whole lot of different biobanks opening up in the UK. That isn't the idea, because although we have articulated all the procedures, the standard operating procedures, the procedures we use when we collect the blood and the data, there would still be differences in the replication if it was done at another major centre. So we are quite keen that this remains the one collection point. And of course, that does have problems with geography, because we do have to get the samples there in time so that they can be processed and frozen and stored without the staff having to stay until 3 o'clock in the morning. So that does slightly restrict the areas in which we're working at the moment. But one of the reasons for publishing was to show how robust all the standard operating procedures are, that they're being very carefully followed. And it was so that researchers could be confident that the samples that they received from us had been very carefully taken and stored, and the accompanying data collected as carefully. Now, we're hoping in the future that the biobank will be replicated in other countries, because obviously we have a certain population type here, and it doesn't mirror the worldwide population. So it's very important that samples are collected from other places in the world. Otherwise, the results that we get won't apply to other populations. So we're hopeful that other countries, and at the moment, Eliana's been very involved with a European initiative, also initiatives in the United States, possibly in Canada, possibly in Australia. And as biobanking becomes a more usual practice, we hope that that will expand even further worldwide, and that our paper would be used as a prototype document to guide the establishment of those biobanks. So no, it wasn't just showing off.
I think it's also worth noting, just along the similar lines, that of course the lessons from our biobanking practice don't only have to be applied to MECFS. Well, last year we came runner-up in UK Biobank of the Year, and that's any biobank. That's not just limited to our particular research field. And off the back of that, and off the back of our paper, I think there are lessons in our practice and in our history that could be applied to other diseases usefully by others wanting to set up a disease-specific biobank in the manner that we have done. And so that was another reason, is that actually we think that there's something that could perhaps be a little bit broader than MECFS that we could share with people interested in this kind of work.
Sure. Which I think is a fair point, because obviously, particularly as I'm representing an ME forum here, I will naturally tend to focus on ME as the subject, but like you say, that if you're providing good practices, those can be useful for any disease-specific biobank, or even just a general biobank, I suppose.
Absolutely, and I think it's good in a way that our research field, MECFS, is putting something back into the kind of general scientific field. I think that none of us would disagree that in many senses MECFS research is far behind research in other diseases, but actually if we put out outputs that are useful for research in other diseases, that helps the kind of process of integration with scientific research as a whole. And that's why I think that our model is really, really useful and really replicable. And we're very happy for it to be shared just beyond our own particular research sector.
Sure. Okay, wonderful, thank you. Your next paper really looked at interviews with participants in the biobank. I just wondered again, really how you saw that paper being useful to well, the wider community, I suppose, research community, and indeed even what you might individually have found interesting from either that paper or any of the papers that we're going to be talking about.
I think that you are referring to the focus group with people with CFS and with
Yes.
Yes, so I think that this is one thing that is very dear to us, because we have a profound respect for the participants from the biobank and the participants from our research as well. So as Jack said, we have the research team before we have the biobank.
Sure.
And we started the biobank with this participatory approach that we thought that it's just right to do research with the potential views from the subjects that the research is intended to or aim to. And what we did, even with the biobank, we have some focus groups with people with ME/CFS that helped us to design this biobank, this disease-specific biobank. And following this approach, we thought that we could have some input from the community that we are researching. And this is not only people with ME/CFS, but people with MS that has dedicated time and gave blood samples for us and went through the whole clinical procedure. And we got their views. And I think that it was very important for legitimating the condition. And I think that to show people that we have their views integrated in our research.
I think it's very important that all of our work is participatory. It's a thread that travels through almost everything we do. That this work isn't done for our benefit, it isn't for us, it's for our participants, it's for Science Premier's members, it's for everyone with ME. And our process of consulting, our process of making sure that our work works for people with ME touches many areas of our kind of practice. That includes things that are formalized, like the focus groups that were run when the biobank was first set up, and the focus groups that were run in 2017 and formed the basis for this paper, and includes things like patients and carers being part of our steering committee, but also includes informalized discussion, just like this Q&A. I think it's really important to reflect upon that, particularly in ME research. And we hope it's something that travels all the way through our work and that paper helps bring out.
Okay, all right, wonderful, thank you. And I'll say the last two. I imagine that they won't be the last two ever. The last two papers really looked at really what was going on with patients. So we had one looking at cellular immune function, and then the second, the clinical pathology. So just a few words on those, just to give people who may not have read up on those, an idea of what you've published. We didn't gain any particular questions about those papers, but I thought it would be useful to kind of educate anybody watching this about what you've published recently.
Okay, I think that I will talk initially about the second one, which is the creatine phosphatase paper.
Sure. Yeah.
This is a routine blood test that usually we look into any muscle issues or specific diseases. And we consider usually the abnormality when it's out of range, but higher than the normal range expected. And we were just describing these routine tests. And we found that people with ME/CFS have lower CK. And actually, it was interesting because we found two papers that reported that, but they didn't realize the significance of it. And then we started looking at the biological milieu behind this. And we could find that this could be a clinical indicator of not only severity, but it could be, in addition to other testings, a potential marker, clinical marker for ME/CFS. I'm not talking about a biomarker.
Mm-hmm.
Results still have to be validated, and we have to be very careful about that. But it's an interesting indicator because it shows that something related to the energy production is going wrong. And this is what this paper means. So
Yes.
it's a suggestion that by comparing these routine tests between ME/CFS and healthy controls, and between mild, moderate, and severe individuals with ME/CFS, we found significant differences. So this is all what this paper means. Just rectifying that we are not talking about a found biomarker. We have to be very careful about that, but it's a clinical indicator of severity at risk. The second one is part of the NIH project that Jack was mentioning before, and it was part of our grant proposal to the NIH to do hematological profiles, and specifically looking at the NK cells, natural killer cells. And we didn't find the findings that previous studies have found, but we found some differences in another kind of cells from the immune system. And this is what we are talking about. These are results were found with work performed with our baseline group. And we are looking at the follow-up, the first follow-up, 6 to 12 months follow-up, to see if this is still there. And later on, as a result of this, we'll be correlating the clinical findings, the ones such as decay, hand grip, and other clinical measurements that we carried out. And we will correlate this with the biomedical results that are the MAGE cells, for example, cytokines, and other findings that are still a work in progress.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for those.
I think it's worth setting in context that research that we're still very much midway through our NIH-funded project. It began in 2013 and was renewed for another 4 years in 2017, and it contains within it an awful lot of different types of work: virological work, immunology work, clinical work, and so on and so forth. And what you're seeing is all the results from the first set of recruitments that we did, which was a kind of broad, shallow recruitment of around 500 people. What we're now doing is following up 110 people over several time points. So each of them will be visited by us, I think, 4 times over the course of the renewal. And then at the end of it, what we hope to have is a complete kind of set of data whereby we have this broad base with 500 people involved once or twice, and then a further 100 and so people involved, I think, up to 6 times across the entire study. And what you're probably seeing now is little bits of the jigsaw. You're seeing a bit of the jigsaw coming out from the immunology and the clinical work. And the overall aim of the grant is absolutely to integrate all of those things, the clinical work, the immunology, and so on and so forth, put all of those results together for something that we hope is quite comprehensive. But we're still very much midway through that process. And this is a grant that runs until 2021. And so I'm sorry to say, kind of hang on, and we'll get around to it in a few years' time. But that's very much the process. It's an 8-year process, and that we are working through. And when all those jigsaw pieces come together in a few years' time, I think that's when the full value of the NIH's investment in our work should, I hope, become really clear.
Okay, thank you. So can you give any kind of hint for anything forthcoming or soon to be published yet, or that wasn't meant to be a terribly tricky question, but if you prefer not to say.
It's not tricky. I think that the main issue is that we are very cautious of telling about our results until we look carefully in what it means. And we try to look into the previous work that has been done by colleagues and try to to see if we are seeing the same thing or if we are finding different things. So I think that it's mainly this idea. But we had, when we submitted a grant application to the NIH, we have this main aim that although Jack said it's very comprehensive, it's basically related to immunology and gene expression, also related to the work of immune cells.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what we are doing at the moment. But having said that, we also are looking at different things that might be coming out. So from clinical data, for example, Kate is doing some research on that, and we can, as soon as possible, we can submit some paper on this.
Sure.
I mean, I'm not breaching any confidence in saying that we have other programs of work ongoing that will ultimately lead to publication. We also have from the NIH what's called an R21 grant, which is a kind of smaller pilot grant, which is led by our colleague Dr. Jackie Cliff. That's been looking at monthly saliva samples taken over a 6-month period last year from people with ME. We are doing some work related to metabolomics in B cells in collaboration with UCL, University College London, funded by the ME Association. You can find out about that on our website, as well as everything that's done within the scope of the NIH grant. So there is information out there on our website and in plenty of other places besides what kind of work is ongoing, and that gives an indication of where we might go with publications coming next, without quite being able to put, you know, titles and figures on them quite yet.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Our members asked a couple of questions, essentially, hope I'm not misrepresenting them, suggesting various other avenues of investigation. But from what you described, you seem very busy.
Yeah, you cannot imagine how. We are.
So unless we were able to find you a big pot of money to employ a couple of other people, possibly you've got enough work to be going on with for the moment.
It's so true.
If anyone is watching this and has the big pot of money, then please do better.
We'll be very happy to improve our team and to hire more people to